Let's go over to Israel and talk to Yotam Comfino, who's a correspondent for Herzliya. So welcome to the show, Yotam.
Thank you.
Tell us what you think about this. As I say, I cannot disguise my contempt for these three countries. I mean, what on earth are they playing at? How proud they must be that Hamas offered them their warm gratitude today. They're recognising Palestine as a state, but it's not a state. So this is pure international virtue signalling, isn't it?
It is, and I think what's more interesting is the questions that everyone's asking. Which borders? Who's representing the state? What's the capital? Very normal questions to ask when you start announcing the recognition of a state. I don't disagree with people who wanted to see a two-state solution, but this is not what we're talking about. We're talking about unilateral recognition of a state that doesn't exist, like you said, and also Israel is at war with one of the representatives of the Palestinians in Gaza. So I don't understand how this came about. Well, I do understand how it came about, but it just doesn't really make any sense to do it when there's two parties at war here and it's nowhere near resolved. It's not going to make a change on the ground. And if anything, it's going to play into the hands of Hamas, which is what we're seeing now.
Yeah, yes, but it seems to me this is an egregious example of a syndrome that I think is very worrying. That the longer we get from October the 7th, the further back it seems, the more people seem to forget it. So this announcement today by Ireland, Norway and Spain, you know, if you think about it, if you analyse the chronology of this, the inspiration for this was what Hamas did on October the 7th. And this seems to be the sort of logical extension of that for Ireland, Norway and Spain. They should be condemning Hamas, not being their friends, not reveling in the warm embrace of Hamas as they say, thanks very much. I mean, this is juvenile. This is, as I say, it's just people saying, oh, we support Palestine, aren't we marvellous? It's really worrying that people seem to have forgotten the atrocities that Hamas committed on October the 7th, the raping of babies, the burning of babies, the raping of women, the mass execution of 1,400 innocent Jewish citizens. We should remember that, shouldn't we?
Well, I can tell you, as somebody who covered it from day one, from 6:30 in the morning, on October the 7th, it took about, I would say, 10 days, 2 weeks before coverage of the war shifted totally to Gaza. It was more or less forgotten. And for weeks, I had to bring it up myself that Israel is still also in a war. I remember several times I was on air, like I am right now, and I was talking about humanitarian suffering in Gaza, which is horrendous. But at the same time, there were rockets flying over my head and I had to run for shelter. And some of the anchors were asking me, oh, yeah, you're actually also in a war. And I'm like, yes, there's still a war here. And people forget it because Israel is seen as the bad actor by definition. It doesn't matter what happens. October the 7th is one of the worst massacres committed in modern history. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what is being done to Israel. It will take about 2 weeks before Israel is turned into the aggressor or whatever. And I think that's something that I realized during this war. So to see Ireland, Norway, and Spain recognizing Palestine is not really a shock to me because I see what's happening on the streets of Europe. I just don't understand if your logic is to bring about a two-state solution, why you're not focusing on actually getting the two parties to negotiate between themselves. I know it seems far-fetched now, but there's a reason for that. We're in a war now. So I don't understand why you don't want the parties to negotiate a peace treaty and to recognize each other, because that's what parties that are in a war, that's what they do to solve their issue.
Yeah, and how about this? Before you even think about recognising Palestine as a state, you call for or you demand, in return for this gesture, the release of the hostages.
It's one of the things that I simply do not understand. Today, there was a new footage released of 5 Israeli women who were taken hostage on October the 7th. It's a 3-minute video, and it is showing them blooded in their head, They are being surrounded. They're surrounded by terrorists. They're shouting at them. They're referring to them as dogs, and they're taking them to Gaza. These women are still in Gaza, and nobody is walking on the streets demonstrating for them to be released. Very few actually try to do anything about it. Even the ones whose citizens are still in Gaza. I'm half Danish. The Danish government has a citizen in Gaza. I rarely hear his name even mentioned.
Also, Ireland, Norway and Spain recognising Palestine doesn't amount to a hill of beans. It does not matter. It doesn't mean anything, as you said earlier, and I said. Palestine, you can recognise Palestine as a state. It doesn't make it a state. It isn't a state. So it's just an empty gesture that doesn't mean anything. It is purely international virtue signalling, and that is beyond pathetic, isn't it?
It is, I think, really what should be done. If you care about humanity, if you care so much about the suffering, your number one priority should get Hamas defeated, to get Hamas to either surrender or to destroy Hamas in Gaza, one way or another. This should be your main concern, and especially from the Western countries who took part in occupying two countries for 2 decades nearly. Yeah. Killing hundreds of thousands of people. If that is really, if this is where you come from and you care so much about human suffering, then why is this not in the back of your mind when you're talking about two parties at war now?
Well,
I don't.
The thing is, Jossam, nobody wants to see all these people dying. It's a horrible spectacle, and we all want it to stop. But that doesn't mean to say that some of us still remember October the 7th, and because of that, of course, we still stand with Israel. Very good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. Yotam Camfino there. He's a correspondent over there in Herzliya in Israel. So unbelievable.